Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UESA Defiance, watching the brown and green planet grow larger on the main screen. Kepler 442b looked peaceful from space, but Jake knew that looks could be deceiving. After 20 years of exploring dead worlds, he had learned to expect the unexpected. "Orbit achieved, Captain," reported Lieutenant Amy Chun from her station. The young communications officer had joined his crew 6 months ago, fresh from the academy. She was smart and eager, though sometimes too curious for her own good. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Begin the initial scans." Jake turned to his science officer. "Dr. Parker, what do you see down there?" Dr. Lisa Parker studied her instruments with the focused intensity that made her one of the best xenorchaeologists in the fleet. Her fingers danced across the control panel as data streamed in from the ship's sensors. "The ruins are extensive, Captain. Much larger than the Federation survey indicated. I'm reading structures that go deep underground. Any signs of life?" "Negative. The planet's been dead for centuries, just like the report said." Lisa paused, frowning at her readings. "But there's something odd about the decay patterns. The buildings should have deteriorated more by now." Jake nodded. The Elderly had supposedly died out 500 years ago from some kind of plague. Their homeworld had been declared a memorial site by the Galactic Commerce Federation, off limits to everyone except approved research teams. It had taken Jake 3 years to get permission for this archaeological survey. "Sergeant Blake, prep the landing party. We're going down to take a closer look." Sergeant Tony Blake grinned from his position near the equipment lockers. The big man loved any excuse to get off the ship and stretch his legs. "About time, sir. I was getting tired of looking at stars." 2 hours later, their shuttle touched down in what had once been the center of an Aldery city. The buildings around them were unlike anything in current galactic architecture. They curved and flowed like living things, made from some kind of crystal that still gleamed despite centuries of abandonment. Jake breathed in the thin but breathable atmosphere. "Stay close, everyone. We don't know what kind of hazards might be down here." They made their way through empty streets toward the largest structure in the city center. Lisa's scanner beeped constantly as she recorded everything they saw. "The preservation is remarkable," she said. "It's almost like they just vanished yesterday." "That's what the plague report said," Amy replied, though her voice carried a note of doubt. "Sudden onset, complete extinction within months." Tony kicked at a pile of what looked like children's toys scattered on the ground. "Funny kind of plague that leaves toys lying around neat and tidy. You'd think there'd be more signs of panic, bodies, medical equipment, something." Jake had been thinking the same thing. The city looked more like it had been carefully evacuated than devastated by disease. But he kept his thoughts to himself as they approached the central building. The structure rose 50 stories into the air, its crystal walls shifting color in the sunlight. Lisa's scanner went wild as they drew closer. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from underground. There's some kind of power source still active down there. After 500 years? Aldery technology was always advanced. Maybe they built things to last." They found an entrance that led down into the building's lower levels. Emergency lighting flickered on as they descended, activated by their presence. The walls were covered with symbols that shifted and changed as they watched. "Can you read any of this?" Jake asked Lisa. "Some of it, basic Aldery script. But there are sections I don't recognize." She paused at one wall, running her fingers over the glowing symbols. "This says something about the hidden truth, and those who came in peace but brought chains." They went deeper into the underground complex. The air grew cooler, and Jake could hear the hum of active machinery somewhere ahead. After 20 minutes of walking through corridors that seemed to go on forever, they reached a massive chamber filled with crystalline storage units. "My God," Lisa whispered. "It's a data vault. These crystals could hold the entire history of their civilization." Amy pulled out her scanner and began running it over the nearest storage unit. "The data is intact, but it's heavily encrypted. It might take days to crack even one of these." "We have time," Jake said. "Set up the equipment. Let's see what the Aldery wanted to hide down here." It took them 6 hours to break the encryption on the first crystal. When the data finally flowed across Lisa's portable screen, her face went pale. "Captain, you need to see this." Jake leaned over her shoulder and began reading. The text was in Aldery, but the translation software made it clear enough. It was a report from someone called Archive Keeper Thalmuth, dated just 3 days before. The supposed plague outbreak. "The Vorthic ships entered our system this morning under the banner of the Commerce Federation. They said they came to offer trade agreements and cultural exchange. Our council welcomed them with the traditional ceremonies of friendship." Jake frowned. "The Vorthic are one of the most respected species in the Federation. They've been our allies for decades." Lisa continued reading. But by evening, their true purpose became clear. The trade agreements were slavery contracts. The cultural exchange was the theft of our young. When our council refused to sign, they deployed weapons we had never seen before. The report went on to describe how the Vorthic had used some kind of neural weapon to incapacitate the adult population, then began loading Aldery children onto transport ships. The archive keeper had managed to hide in the data vault as the city above was systematically emptied. The elders they left behind, claiming they were too old to be useful. But I have seen the truth. This is not the first world they have cleansed. I have accessed their ship's databases. The Corvani, the Felmari, the Zephyrhites, all species the Federation claims died from natural causes. All lies, all murdered or enslaved by those we trusted. Amy's scanner suddenly beeped with an urgent tone. "Captain, I'm picking up a massive data burst from the other storage units. It's like they're all activating at once." The chamber filled with light as hundreds of crystalline storage units came online. Holographic displays materialized in the thus air around them, showing star charts, ship movements, and lists of names that made Jake's blood run cold. Species Assessment Report. Homo sapiens, read one display. Emotional but trainable. High pain tolerance. Suitable for heavy labor operations. Recommend gradual integration beginning with outer colonies. Estimated timeline for full subjugation, 5 years. Another display showed recent transport logs. Human names. Colonists who had supposedly died in accidents or disappeared during failed expeditions. But according to these records, they were very much alive and working in mines. Scattered across the galaxy. Tony was staring at a tactical display that showed the locations of hidden facilities throughout Federation space. "Captain, there are slave operations and systems we visit regularly. How did we never see this?" "Because we weren't looking for it," Jake said grimly. "And because our allies made sure we wouldn't." Lisa had found more recent intelligence reports. "Jake, they're not just planning to enslave us. They're already doing it. The genetic modification programs in the outer colonies, the cultural exchange programs, the joint research projects, it's all part of preparing humanity for integration into their system." Jake stared at the evidence floating around them. Hundreds of species, billions of individuals, all enslaved or murdered while the galaxy looked the other way. And humanity was next on the list. "Download everything," he ordered. "Every file, every record, every piece of evidence. We're taking this back to Earth." "Sir, if we report this through normal channels, it might get buried or suppressed," Amy warned. "Half the Federation might be involved." Jake looked around at the chamber full of horrors, thinking of the thousands of humans who had already vanished. thinking of the billions more who had no idea what was coming for them. "Then we don't go through normal channels," he said. "We take this directly to people we can trust, people who will act on it." As they worked to copy the Owlery archives, Jake made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. The truth was out there, and now humanity knew it. The slavers had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated what humans would do when they discovered their children were in danger. The Defiance lifted off from Kepler 442b, 12 hours later, carrying the most important cargo in human history. In the ship's data banks lay the evidence that would expose a conspiracy spanning centuries and species. Jake set course for Earth, knowing that once this information reached the right people, there could be no going back. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity discovered the truth. Admiral Helen Cross sat in her office on Luna Base, staring at the data crystal Jake Morrison had placed on her desk 3 hours ago. The evidence it contained made her stomach turn. She had served in Earth's Defense Intelligence Division for 30 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. "How sure are you about this information?" she asked Jake, who stood at attention before her desk. 100%, Admiral. We verified it through multiple sources in the Owlery archives. The data is authentic. Helen touched her communication panel. "Send word to Colonel Davis, Dr. Barnes, and Agent Wilson. Emergency meeting in Conference Room 7. Maximum security protocols." Within an hour, Helen's most trusted people had gathered around the secure conference table. Colonel Ryan Davis commanded Earth's Special Operations Forces. Dr. Neil Barnes was the military's top expert on alien biology. Agent Kate Wilson ran covert operations in Federation space. "What you're about to see will change everything," Helen told them as she activated the holographic display. The air filled with images from the Owlery archives, slave ships, mining facilities, lists of extinct species that weren't really extinct. Ryan leaned forward, studying the tactical displays. "How many species are we talking about?" "At least 23 confirmed extinctions over the past 1,000 years, Jake replied. "All of them blamed on natural causes or voluntary isolation. All of them lies." Kate was examining shipping manifests that showed human names among recent acquisitions. "Some of these people are from my operations. Colonists who disappeared during the Centauri expedition, researchers who vanished while studying ancient ruins. We assumed they were dead." Dr. Barnes pulled up biological data on his tablet. "These genetic modification protocols are sophisticated. They're designed to make enslaved populations more docile and dependent over generations. Look at this timeline for humans. They've been introducing compounds into our food supply through trade agreements for the past 50 years. Helen felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying they're already changing us?" "The modifications are subtle and take time to manifest. Most humans wouldn't notice the effects for several generations. But yes, the process has begun in some of our outer colonies." Ryan stood up and began pacing. "We need to know the full scope of this operation. How many facilities? How many ships? How many of our people are already enslaved?" "That's where Agent Wilson comes in," Helen said. "Kate, I need you to infiltrate the Vorthic diplomatic mission on Titan Station. They're planning a cultural exchange program next month. Get inside and find out what they really know." Kate nodded. "I can be ready in 48 hours. But if they suspect anything, this whole investigation could be compromised." "The risk is acceptable. We need intelligence, and we need it fast." 3 weeks later, Kate sat in a Vorthic transport ship, disguised as a cultural anthropologist studying human social patterns. The Vorthic delegation treated her with polite condescension, clearly viewing humans as primitive, but potentially useful. During the journey to Titan Station, she managed to access their computer systems while the crew slept. What she found made her blood boil. The Vorthik had detailed psychological profiles on thousands of humans, including herself. They knew her real identity, her mission history, even her personal habits, but they weren't treating her as a threat. The files labeled her as useful but harmless, and suggested she might make a good administrator in their planned human management system. Their arrogance was stunning. Kate also discovered communication logs between the Vorthik and other Federation species. The conspiracy wasn't limited to one or two alien races. At least 8 major Federation members were involved in the slave network, each contributing different resources and expertise. The Corvani provided medical knowledge for the genetic modifications. The Thelmari manufactured the neural control devices. The Xerians handled transportation and logistics. Even some of humanity's closest allies had been feeding information to the slavers for decades. She learned that the integration process for humanity was ahead of schedule. The Vorthik had been pleased with how easily humans accepted their guidance and how willing they were to send colonists to remote systems where they could be harvested without attracting attention. When Kate returned to Earth, she brought with her terabytes of stolen data and a personal recording device that had captured Vorthik leaders discussing their plans in detail. "The humans are more emotional than previous species," said one Vorthik commander in the recording. "But this makes them predictable. They respond well to authority figures and rarely question orders from trusted sources. The integration should be complete within 3 years." Dr. Barnes analyzed the biological samples Kate had obtained during her mission. His findings were worse than anyone had expected. The genetic modifications aren't just in the outer colonies. They've been introducing trace compounds into trade goods for 50 years. Every human alive today has some level of modification in their system. "How severe is it?" Helen asked. "For most people, the effects are minimal right now. Slightly reduced aggression, increased compliance with authority, weakened immune responses to certain alien pathogens. But if they continue the program, within 2 generations humans will be completely dependent on Vorthik medical treatments to survive." Colonel Davis had been analyzing the tactical data from the slave facilities. The good news is that their operations are more vulnerable than they know. They rely on secrecy and the assumption that enslaved species will never work together. They also underestimate the military capabilities of primitive races. "What do you mean?" Helen asked. "Their ship designs have obvious weaknesses that they never bothered to fix because no enslaved species has ever had the technology to exploit them. Their ground facilities are built for intimidation, not defense. And most importantly, they don't expect coordinated resistance." Kate had found something else in the Vorthik files: communication records with surviving members of supposedly extinct species. The Aldari aren't all dead. Neither are the Corvani, the Thelmari, or most of the others. There are resistance groups hidden throughout the galaxy, small populations that escaped the initial roundups. "Have you made contact with any of them?" Helen asked. "I've identified several communication channels. The survivors have been trying to coordinate resistance efforts for centuries, but they lack the resources and technology to mount effective operations." Dr. Barnes looked up from his analysis. "There's something else. The biological modifications can be reversed if we act quickly enough. The compounds break down naturally over time if they're not continuously reinforced. A targeted medical treatment could undo decades of modification within months." Helen stood up and walked to the window overlooking Earth. Below her, billions of people went about their daily lives, unaware that their entire species was scheduled for enslavement. The weight of knowledge felt crushing. "We need to brief President Johnson," she said finally. "This is too big for military intelligence alone." Ryan shook his head. I am. If word of this gets out through normal government channels, it could cause mass panic. Or worse, it could alert the conspirators that we know about them. Then what do you suggest?" We keep this compartmentalized for now. Build our evidence, make contact with the resistance groups, identify which Federation members can be trusted. When we're ready to act, we move fast and hit everything at once. Kate was studying star charts on her tablet. I can reach out to the Aldery survivors first. According to these files, they have the most complete intelligence on Vorthik operations. If we can convince them to work with us, they might be able to contact other resistance groups. Do it, but carefully. We can't afford to tip our hand, too. Early, Dr. Barnes cleared his throat. There's one more thing. The files show that the Vorthik are planning to accelerate the human integration timeline. Something about political changes in the Federation, making their current approach too risky. They want to complete the process within 18 months instead of 3 years. Helen felt the room grow cold. 18 months to save her entire species. It wasn't much time, but it would have to be enough. All right, people, we have our mission. Kate, establish contact with the resistance groups. Ryan, start developing tactical plans for hitting their facilities. Neil, work on treatments for the genetic modifications. I'll handle the political side and start identifying who we can trust. As the meeting broke up, Helen remained at the window, looking down at Earth. Somewhere out there, human children were playing in schools, unaware that alien species had already marked them for slavery. Parents were tucking their kids into bed, not knowing that everything they had been told about humanity's place in the galaxy was a lie dot, but now the truth was known. And if there was one thing Helen had learned about humans during her military career, it was that they didn't give up easily when their families were threatened. The slavers had made a fatal mistake in underestimating what humans would do to protect their children. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's military motto was never again. President Mary Johnson sat in the Oval Office, her hands trembling as she finished reading Admiral Cross's classified report. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Every human being on Earth and in the colonies was living under a death sentence they didn't even know about. How long do we have? She asked Admiral Cross, who stood beside her desk with Colonel Davis and Dr. Barnes. 18 months, maybe less, Helen replied. The Vorthik are accelerating their timeline. Once they begin the final phase, there won't be any going back. Mary closed the file and looked out the window at the White House lawn. Children were playing there during a school tour, their laughter carrying through the glass. In 18 months, those same children might be working in alien mines on the other side of the galaxy. What do you need from me? Complete authorization for Operation Guardian Shield, Helen said. The largest military buildup in human history, but it has to look routine. We can't let the Federation know what we're really preparing for. You have it. Whatever resources you need, whatever authority you require. Just bring our people home. Within a week, President Johnson announced a comprehensive defense modernization program. The official reason was concerns about pirate activity in the outer systems and the need to protect expanding human colonies. Nobody questioned why humanity suddenly needed 3 times as many warships and twice as many Marines. General Pete Collins took charge of the weapons development program. His team of engineers and scientists worked around the clock in secret facilities hidden throughout the solar system. Their mission was simple but challenging. Build weapons that could defeat technology, centuries ahead of Earth's current capabilities. Key is not to match their technology. Pete explained to his team during their first briefing. We need to exploit their weaknesses. The Vorthik have been using the same ship designs for hundreds of years because no enslaved species has ever been able to threaten them. Engineer Frank Lopez studied the technical data Kate Wilson had stolen from the Vorthik ships. Their plasma shields are designed to deflect energy weapons, but they're vulnerable to kinetic projectiles fired at specific angles. And their hull plating has a resonance frequency that could be exploited. Explain that in simple terms, Pete said. If we hit them with the right kind of bullets, at the right speed and angle, their shields won't stop us. And if we can match the vibration frequency of their hull metal, we can literally shake their ships apart. Frank's team began developing new ammunition types and targeting systems. They created tungsten core projectiles that could punch through alien armor and sonic weapons that could disable enemy ships without destroying them. They wanted to capture as many slavers alive as possible for the trials that would come later. Meanwhile, Dr. Susan Kim worked on the communication problem. Humanity needed to coordinate resistance efforts across dozens of star systems without the Federation detecting their messages. Traditional radio and laser communications can be intercepted too. Easily, she explained to her team. We need something completely different. Her solution was quantum encrypted burst transmissions that looked like natural stellar phenomena to conventional sensors. The messages were hidden inside fake solar flare data and cosmic radiation patterns. Even if the Federation intercepted the signals, they would appear to be random space noise. Susan's network allowed Admiral Cross to establish secure contact with resistance groups throughout the galaxy. The responses that came back were both heartbreaking and encouraging. The Aldari survivors had been hiding in asteroid mining stations for 500 years, keeping their culture alive through secret ceremonies and forbidden songs. They possessed detailed maps of every Vorthic facility in their home sector. The aquatic Nethys had built underwater cities on ocean worlds that the slavers had written off as uninhabitable. They had developed biotechnology that could neutralize the genetic modifications the Vorthic used to control enslaved populations. The crystalline Zephyrite lived in deep cave systems on airless worlds, patient and enduring, maintaining detailed records of every ship movement and guard rotation at nearby slave facilities. They've been waiting for this moment for centuries, Kate Wilson reported after her first contact session. All they needed was someone with the technology and military capability to coordinate a real rebellion. Commander Alex Rivero led the most dangerous part of the preparation, covert rescue operations to extract human slaves and gather intelligence about the slave network's current operations. His team used modified cargo ships that could slip past Federation sensors. Their first mission took them to a mining facility in the Tau Ceti system. The record showed it held over 300 humans who had supposedly died in a colony ship accident 2 years earlier. Alex and his team waited in space for 3 weeks, studying the facility's routine. The Vorthic guards followed predictable patterns, changing shifts every 8 hours with military precision. They were confident in their security because no rescue had ever been attempted. On a moonless night, Alex's team landed near the mining complex. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, using night vision equipment that the Vorthic couldn't detect. The alien guards relied on motion sensors and thermal imaging that couldn't track the specialized gear Earth's military had developed. Remember, we go in quiet and we get everyone out, Alex whispered into his radio. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. These people have suffered enough. They found the human workers in dormitories that were little better than prison cells. The men and women were thin and tired, their eyes dull from years of forced labor and mind control drugs. But when Alex's team appeared in their doorways, speaking English and wearing Earth military uniforms, hope flickered back to life. We're here to take you home, Alex told them. The rescue went perfectly. The Vorthic guards never knew what happened until they found empty dormitories the next morning. By then, Alex's ship was already jumping back to Earth, space with 300 freed humans, and a complete recording of the facility's operations. Dr. Barnes immediately began treating the rescued humans for the genetic modifications and psychological conditioning they had endured. The Vorthic had been more thorough than expected in breaking down their prisoners' resistance, but human resilience proved stronger than alien science. "They tried to make us forget who we were," said Maria Santos, one of the rescued colonists. "They wanted us to think of ourselves as property, not people. But we never stopped being human." The rescued humans provided crucial intelligence about the slave network structure. They had seen transport ships arriving with new prisoners from dozens of different species. They knew which facilities held the most people and which ones had the weakest security. Most importantly, they confirmed that the resistance groups and other species were real and active. Aldari prisoners had taught human workers their freedom songs. Nethi's captives had shared their biotechnology knowledge. Even in the depths of slavery, the different species had been helping each other survive. Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Stone took charge of coordinating with the alien resistance groups. Her job was to turn centuries of separate survival efforts into a unified rebellion that could strike everywhere at once. "The key is timing," she explained to Admiral Cross during a strategy meeting. "The Vorthik control their empire through fear and isolation. If we can hit multiple facilities simultaneously, showing every enslaved being that resistance is possible, the whole system could collapse." Rachel's planning sessions included holographic conferences with resistance leaders from a dozen different species. They spoke different languages and came from completely different worlds, but they all shared the same determination to be free. The Aldari leader, a female named Falanara, had survived the original attack on her homeworld as a child. "We have waited 500 years for this moment," she said through the translator. "Our songs of freedom will finally be heard again." The Nethi's coordinator, called Depth Singer by his people, brought maps of underwater facilities that the Vorthik thought were impossible to attack. "The deep places remember," he said. "We know every current, every hiding place." The Zephyrite representative communicated through light patterns that Dr. King's team had learned to read. Their message was simple. The crystals sing of liberation. "We are ready." As the months passed, humanity's secret preparations grew more sophisticated. Weapons factories hidden in asteroid belts produced ammunition designed specifically for alien targets. Training facilities on remote moons taught human soldiers how to fight in low-gravity and alien atmospheres. The medical program expanded as Dr. Barnes developed treatments that could reverse decades of genetic modification in a matter of weeks. The therapy was painful but effective, allowing rescued humans to reclaim their natural resilience and independence. Most importantly, the communication network grew stronger every day. Resistance cells throughout the galaxy began coordinating their efforts, sharing intelligence and resources through Susan Kim's quantum channels. The slavers remained completely unaware of what was building around them. Their arrogance had become their greatest weakness. They saw humans as primitive and emotional, incapable of the kind of long-term planning that effective rebellion required. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral Cross stood in the war room, deep beneath Luna Base, watching his countdown timers from across the galaxy synchronized on the main display. In 12 hours, Operation Freedom's Dawn would begin, the largest coordinated military action in galactic history was about to unfold. "All Liberation fleets report ready," Colonel Davis announced from his station. 127 targets across 43 star systems. Every team knows their mission. Helen nodded, feeling the weight of 2 billion lives on her shoulders. Every human being in known space, plus countless millions from other enslaved species, was counting on the next 24 hours going perfectly. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the secure communication system from his position near the Rigel system. "Strike Team Alpha in position. The primary Vorthik command center is in range." "Strike Team Beta ready," reported Commander Rivera from the Centauri sector. 15 slave facilities locked on target. Similar reports flooded in from human battle. Groups positioned throughout the galaxy. Each team included not just Earth military personnel, but volunteers from every liberated species. Althari engineers who understood Vorthic technology. Nethys commandos who could operate in any environment. Zephyrite specialists who could survive in vacuum and penetrate seemingly impossible defenses. Dr. Barnes stood at the medical coordination station, monitoring the treatment centers that had been secretly established on dozens of worlds. Medical teams report ready. We can begin genetic reversal therapy the moment liberated prisoners are secured. Kate Wilson checked her intelligence networks one final time. No signs that the Vorthic suspect anything. Their security patrols are following normal routines. They still think we're too primitive to pose a threat. General Collins reviewed the tactical displays showing enemy ship positions. Remember, people, we want prisoners when possible. The galaxy needs to see justice done, not just revenge taken. At exactly 08:00 Universal Standard Time, the liberation began. Jake Morrison's battle group struck first. Emerging from hyperspace directly above the Vorthic command station orbiting Rigel 7, a massive alien structure bristled with weapons that had never been seriously challenged in 500 years of operation. All ships execute attack. Pattern Morrison 7, Jake ordered. His fleet consisted of 20 human cruisers supported by captured Vorthic vessels, now crewed by liberated Althari. The mixed force confused the station's automated defenses, which couldn't distinguish friend from foe. The tungsten core projectiles Frank Lopez had designed punched through the station's shields like they were made of paper. Sonic weapons tuned to the exact frequency of Vorthic hull metal sent vibrations racing through the structure, cracking armor plates and jamming weapon systems. Direct hit on their command center, reported his tactical officer. They're trying to send distress signals, but we're jamming all frequencies. Jake watched through his bridge windows as Althari boarding parties used their intimate knowledge of Vorthic technology to take control of key systems. 500 years of slavery had taught them exactly where to strike to disable their former master's defenses. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out at slave facilities that had operated in secret for centuries. Human Marines and alien resistance fighters worked together with precision that stunned their enemies. On the water world of Kepler 438c, Nethys warriors emerged from the depths to guide human submarines to underwater mining platforms. The Vorthic guards had never imagined an attack coming from below, and their surface-oriented defenses were useless against amphibious assault troops, who could breathe water as easily as air. Commander Rivera led the assault on a massive prison complex built inside an asteroid in the Wolf 359 system. His mixed force of humans and Zephyrite moved through the zero-gravity environment like dancers, using their ability to operate in vacuum to bypass the facility's airlocks entirely. Breaching the main detention area now, Rivera reported as his team cut through the asteroid's metal shell. Estimated 3,000 prisoners inside, multiple species. The Vorthic guards inside the facility found themselves fighting an enemy they had never encountered before. Human soldiers who refused to surrender when threatened. Alien resistance fighters who had spent lifetimes planning for this moment. Liberated prisoners who joined the battle the instant their cell doors opened. But the liberation forces faced challenges too. Some Vorthic facilities were more heavily defended than intelligence had indicated. Others had been rigged with self-destruct devices designed to kill prisoners rather than let them escape. Sarah Kim led a rescue team into a facility that began counting down to destruction the moment they breached the perimeter. "We've got 5 minutes before this whole place goes up," she radioed to her team. "Every second counts." Her soldiers spread through the complex like wildfire, breaking open cell blocks and herding confused prisoners toward the evacuation ships. Many of the captives had been enslaved so long they didn't understand what was happening. Some tried to return to their cells, thinking the rescue was some kind of trick. "You're free," Sarah told a group of human colonists who cowered away from her soldiers. "We're taking you home." "Home?" asked an older man, whose eyes showed the dull compliance of years of mind-control drugs. "The master said home was gone. Side Earth was destroyed." "Earth is fine," Sarah assured him as she guided his group toward the exit. "And you're going back there today." With 30 seconds left on the countdown, Sarah's team evacuated the last prisoners. The facility exploded behind them as their ships jumped to safety, but everyone was saved. The political effects of the liberation began immediately. Agent Wilson had coordinated the release of evidence to news networks throughout Federation space. Within hours, the truth about the slave network was broadcasting on every channel. Species that had been told their neighbors died from natural causes learned they had actually been murdered or enslaved. Worlds that thought they were safe discovered they were next on the slavers' list. A carefully maintained facade of galactic peace crumbled in a single day. "Emergency session of the Federation Council in 6 hours," Wilson reported to Admiral Cross. "Half the member species are demanding explanations. The other half are trying to distance themselves from the Vorthik." But the Vorthik weren't finished. Their response came swiftly and brutally. Admiral Thakmer, commander of the Vorthik Deep Fleet, ordered immediate retaliation against human worlds. "If the prey wishes to become predator, we will remind them why they were prey," he declared in a broadcast to his forces. "Destroy their colonies, enslave their populations. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the natural order." The first Vorthik counterattack struck the human colony on New Geneva. A fleet of alien dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace and began bombarding civilian targets. The colonists, warned by Admiral Cross's intelligence network, had already evacuated to underground shelters, but the attack was meant to send a message of terror. The message backfired. Instead of frightening the liberation forces, the bombing of civilians enraged them. Species throughout the galaxy that had been neutral suddenly chose sides. "The Corvani Republic offers full military support," announced their representative during an emergency communication. "Any species that bombs civilians has forfeited their right to exist." "The Meridian Alliance stands with the liberation forces," declared another voice. "Our fleets are at your disposal." Even some former Vorthek allies began switching sides as evidence of the slave network's scope became undeniable. The Xerians, who had provided transportation services for the slavers, offered to help hunt down hidden facilities in exchange for mercy during the trials that would follow. The Battle of Kepler Station became the turning point of the war. Commander Rivera's Liberation Fleet, now reinforced with ships from 6 different species, faced off against a Vorthik armada twice their size. The alien commanders expected an easy victory. They had superior numbers, more advanced technology, and centuries of military experience. But they had never fought an enemy that included their own former slaves. "All ships formation Morrison Delta," Rivera ordered. "Aldari vessels, execute maneuver Thalanara 7. The Aldari ships, still bearing Vorthik design, but now crewed by liberated survivors, peeled away from the main formation and attacked the enemy's flanks. The Vorthik fleet's targeting computers couldn't distinguish between friendly and enemy vessels of identical design. In the confusion, human ships closed to point-blank range and unleashed their kinetic weapons. Tungsten slugs tore through alien hulls while sonic weapons disabled critical systems. But the real advantage came from coordination. The Liberation Fleet fought as a unified force where every species contributed their unique abilities. Nethi's pilots could handle underwater combat. Zephyrite excelled in zero-gravity boarding actions. Humans provided the strategic thinking and determination that held everything together. When the battle ended 6 hours later, the Vorthik Armada was destroyed or captured. Admiral Thicmer himself was taken prisoner when his flagship's crew mutinied, led by Aldari engineers who had been forced to maintain the ship's systems. "This is impossible," Thicmer said as human Marines escorted him to a detention cell. "You are primitives, prey animals. You cannot defeat the natural order." Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the UES Victory, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history approached. Vorthik Prime. Ships from 23 different species stretched across space like a metal constellation. Human cruisers flew alongside Aldari vessels. Nethi's bioships moved next to Zephyrite crystal fighters. The sight would have been impossible just 6 months ago. "All fleets report ready for final assault," announced Colonel Davis from the tactical station. 800 ships total. Every species that was ever enslaved is represented here. Helen looked at the blue-green world growing larger on the main screen. Vorthik Prime had been the center of galactic slavery for over 1,000 years. From this planet, orders had gone out to destroy civilizations and enslave billions of beings. Today, that would end. "Signal from the planetary defense grid," reported Lieutenant Chun. "They're demanding we withdraw or face total destruction." "Send our reply," Helen said calmly. "Unconditional surrender of all Vorthik forces and full cooperation with the Liberation Tribunal. Nothing less will be accepted." The response came quickly. "They refuse, Admiral. The planetary commander says humans are too primitive to threaten them, and this fleet will be destroyed within the hour." Helen almost smiled. Even now, facing overwhelming force, the Vorthik couldn't see past their own arrogance. That blindness had been their weakness throughout the war. "All ships, begin the assault. Remember, we want prisoners when possible. The galaxy needs to see justice done properly." The battle for Vorthik Prime began with a coordinated strike on the planet's orbital. Defense platforms. These massive stations had protected the homeworld for centuries, their weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. But the Liberation Forces had advantages the station's designers had never imagined. Aldari engineers, who had been forced to maintain the defense systems, knew exactly where to strike. Nethi's infiltrators had secretly planted charges in underwater support facilities. Zephyrite commandos used their ability to survive in vacuum to attack the stations from impossible angles. Captain Morrison led the assault on Defense Platform Alpha, the largest and most heavily armed station guarding the planet. His mixed squadron of human and alien ships moved with perfect coordination, each species contributing their unique abilities to the attack. Aldari teams report successful penetration of the main reactor chamber, Morrison's tactical officer announced. "They're installing override devices now." Within minutes, Platform Alpha's weapons turned on its sister stations. The Vorthik operators watched in horror as their own defenses began destroying each other. Panic spread through the remaining platforms as crews realized their systems had been compromised. "This is impossible," transmitted one platform commander. "How did the slaves know our security codes?" The answer came from Thalanara, the Aldari resistance leader, broadcasting on all frequencies. "We built these stations with our own hands, while you held whips over our backs. Did you think we would forget every circuit, every weakness, every way to bring them down?" One by one, the orbital defenses fell silent. Some were destroyed by the Liberation Fleet. Others surrendered when their crews realized the situation was hopeless. A few self-destructed rather than face capture, but most of the Vorthik soldiers chose survival over glory. With the orbital defenses neutralized, the Liberation Fleet began landing troops on the planet's surface. The main target was the Vorthik High Command Complex in the capital city, where the leadership of the slave empire had directed operations for a millennium. Commander Rivera led the ground assault with the largest combined species force ever assembled. Human Marines fought alongside Aldari warriors who remembered their homeworld's conquest. Nethi's amphibious troops secured the coastal approaches while Zephyrite specialists moved through the city's underground tunnels. The Vorthic military tried to mount a defense, but their forces were demoralized and confused. Many alien soldiers had deserted when news of the liberation victories reached their homeworld. Others surrendered immediately when faced with former slaves who knew all their tactics and weaknesses. Resistance is collapsing across the city, Rivera reported to Admiral Cross. The Vorthic civilians are fleeing, but their military leadership is trapped in the command complex. The final assault on the High Command building took only 3 hours. Human soldiers breached the main entrance, while Althari teams disabled the building's defensive systems from within. There was little fighting as most of the guards abandoned their posts. Colonel Davis personally led the team that captured High Commander Vorthadel, the supreme leader of the slave empire. They found him in his private chamber, still wearing ceremonial robes that had been made from the skin of extinct species. "This is not possible," Vorthadel said, as human soldiers placed restraints on his arms. "You are animals. Pray. You cannot judge your natural superiors." "We're not animals," Davis replied, "and you're about to learn what real justice looks like." The capture of the Vorthic leadership marked the end of organized resistance. Across the planet, alien forces laid down their weapons as news of their commander's defeat spread. The slave empire that had dominated the galaxy for 1,000 years crumbled in a single day, but the hardest work was just beginning. Admiral Cross established the Galactic Liberation Tribunal in the former High Command complex. Representatives from every enslaved species would sit in judgment of their former oppressors. Dr. Barnes led teams of medical specialists who began treating the millions of beings held in slave facilities throughout the Vorthic system. The genetic modifications imposed on enslaved populations could be reversed, but the psychological damage would take longer to heal. Some of these people have been slaves for so many generations they don't remember what freedom looks like, Barnes reported. During a medical briefing, "We're not just healing their bodies. We're teaching them how to be free again." Kate Wilson coordinated the investigation into the slave network's financial structure. The Vorthic had hidden their profits in banks throughout Federation space, using the wealth stolen from enslaved species to buy influence and protection. "We're seizing assets worth trillions of credits," Wilson announced. "Money that was made from selling people like livestock. Every credit will go toward rebuilding the worlds they destroyed." The trials began 6 months after the liberation of Vorthic Prime. The proceedings were broadcast throughout the galaxy, ensuring that every being could see justice being done. Survivors from dozens of species testified about centuries of oppression and brutality. Thalanara spoke for the Althari, her voice carrying the pain of 500 years of slavery. "They took our children and made them forget our songs. They worked our parents to death in mines that enriched their empire. They told the galaxy we died from disease while they sold us like animals." Anethi's elder testified about watching his people's ocean cities burned from orbit. A Zephyrite survivor showed scars from experiments designed to break her species' ability to survive in vacuum. Human colonists described years of forced labor and genetic modification. The evidence was overwhelming. The Vorthic leadership had systematically committed genocide against 23 species while maintaining the facade of galactic peace. They had murdered billions and enslaved millions more, all while presenting themselves as civilized members of the galactic community. High Commander Vorthadel showed no remorse during his trial. "We brought order to chaos," he declared. "We gave purpose to species that would have destroyed themselves. The strong have always ruled the weak. That is the natural law." Judge Helen Cross, now serving as the tribunal's Chief Justice, delivered the final verdict. "You speak of natural law, but there is nothing natural about genocide. nothing civilized about slavery. You perverted the idea of galactic cooperation to hide the greatest crime in history. The sentences were swift and final. The Vorthic leadership received life imprisonment on a barren world where they would spend their remaining years in the same isolation they had imposed on others. Lower-ranking officials received terms proportional to their involvement in the slave network. But punishment was only part of the tribunal's work. The real focus was on rebuilding what had been destroyed. The former slave worlds became the foundation of a new galactic alliance based on principles that humans had helped establish. The Galactic Freedom Charter declared that all intelligent beings had the absolute right to liberty. No species could be enslaved for any reason. No world could be conquered in the name of bringing order or civilization. The charter was signed by representatives from 47 species, many of whom had been considered extinct just a year earlier. Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, took command of Liberation Fleet Command, a permanent multi-species force dedicated to preventing future slavery operations. Their ships patrolled the galaxy with mixed crews from every member species, ensuring that no world would ever again face conquest alone. Dr. Parker established the Galactic Historical Archive on the former Vorthic homeworld. The archives contained the complete records of every enslaved species, preserving languages, cultures, and histories that the slavers had tried to destroy. Knowledge is the best defense against tyranny, Parker explained during the archive's dedication ceremony.